This episode of the Tactics Meeting is brought to you in part by Gallagher Marine Systems. Gallagher Marine Systems is the industry's most comprehensive source of full-service, in-depth compliance support. And by the Washington State Maritime Cooperative, the only non-profit umbrella plan holder dedicated to oil spill readiness for commercial vessels operating in Puget Sound and the Greater Salish Sea. Formed in partnership with Washington State in 1995 to protect these waters, WSMIC has long stood at the intersection of maritime response and environmental protection, supporting safe commerce while safeguarding the coastlines we all depend on. Learn more at wismiccoop.org. Time for a new episode of the Tactics Meeting. For all of you fans of the podcast, we're trying a little different format today. We've got a little group together, and primarily we're going to talk about cybersecurity, which is actually a topic, security in general, a topic I'm pretty interested in, but there's other things going on out there we might toss around. So we'll go around with some introductions for people, and we'll start with Jim Butler, my favorite emergency response attorney, because you got to have a lawyer in the house, right? Jim,
Yeah.
tell us about you.
Well, like most of us, we wear a couple of different hats. Let's put it that way. All with a different sort of technical background. I got involved in incident management prior to going to law school, working on a couple of oil spills that were up here in Alaska. One that wasn't too popular, one that kind of made headlines, which was the Exxon spill. Spent over a year and a half on that and was talked into going to law school by a bunch of attorneys that I was working with. Came back after Open 90 was passed and got involved in doing a lot of compliance work. And at that time, it just seemed like we were still a lot of casualties seemed to be going on still in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's really tapered off. But along the way, got involved with wildland fire to work up qualifications through getting ICS qualified. So I ended up spending parts of my summer being emergency hire for the state of Alaska and worked with the Alaska National Interagency Type 1 team and spent 15 years as the lead liaison officer throughout the Western United States, Alaska, Southern California. Was a Type 1 PIO. And basically just used some communication skills I had refined in the practice with a yellow shirt on in a fire camp, and still worked for a variety of OSROs doing compliance and ship operators doing some casualty work. And along the way, I've had a chance to meet some folks, get a couple funny stories, and learn a few things. So I appreciate the opportunity to be invited. Dan,
Yep. I'm
appreciate it.
thrilled to have you. I really enjoyed working with you when you were the liaison officer on the Genius Star 11. That was awesome. I learned a lot. I didn't
It's
think
fun.
the liaison officer was that important until then. I guess I just hadn't seen it done well before. So,
It's it's like any incident, it's all circumstantial. Sometimes you get to blame the ops guys like Theo, other times you blame guys like me. It's the way it works out.
yes, it's all about blame. Mark, longtime participant on the podcast. Nice to have you. You're still down in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be back. Thank you for the invite. This is awesome. For those that haven't listened to the earlier episodes, my name is Mark Curtis. I am the Senior Director of HSS QE for a company called Fairwater. Fairwater, we move petroleum. And opposite Jim's story, I was very lucky to be the beneficiary of some of the Open 90 funds over at Mass Maritime Academy. They had a oil spill simulator when I was going to the academy. And so I got to learn about response on the tail end of it instead of at the front end of it. And then went to sea, sailed for 10 years, spent the last 15 trying to fix companies, trying to help companies become better and build integrity and ensure that Exxon Valdez doesn't happen again. Definitely not here in the United States or, you know, any of the international routes. So
And you just took on a big new role at Fairwater.
I did. it's the careful for what you ask for. So I just became the designated person ashore, the DPA for the company. I've also become the alternate company security officer, which is why I got the idea of having this particular episode. And I took on the audit department, the environmental department, the training department, and emergency response all at the same time. So I'm kind of getting used to having multiple hats these days, as Jim put it.
Do you find yourself huddled in a fetal position under your desk at the end of the day, going, "What have I done? What have I done?"
Not yet. We're getting there. Give me another week or two.
Theo, welcome, my Swiss Army knife of incident response. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I think it only took me 72 tries to get this thing to work this morning. Thank you very much. I started it a half hour before the meeting started, and I just managed to get all the bugs worked out. So uh, this is pretty typical. So yeah, I actually stumbled into the business a little bit. I was down for the winter working construction in Anchorage, and got an invite to make some Christmas money over the holidays, working for Crowley Environmental Services, and worked out a project there, and I guess did it admirably enough that they offered me a full-time position come January. So I took it, and the rest is kind of history. I've evolved from that, supported pretty much every one of the co-ops that ever existed in Alaska, um, whatever name they're known by, CISPRI or Siri or Absorb or ACS or Guaco even. Ran the warehouse out in Dutch for the middle 80s. And then when things went sluggish in the oil patch, we all went back to school. My daughters were undergrad, my wife and I were graduate school, so I got a master's in hazardous materials management. Went back into the field again, went to work for Shell as an environmental engineer, and did well at that until they sold the business unit I was in. I had another opportunity to adjust my resume and wound up at Texas A&M, heading up that spill program. And I guess since then, pretty much been responding and consulting ever since, training and exercises and doing response operations. So I've been in the field for about 10 minutes or so.
Excellent. Well, and you're one of the Washington State Maritime Cooperative on-call incident commanders, and I'm thrilled to have you. So thanks for jumping on the show. And Charles, first time on the program. Mark brought you in, throw you under the bus. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm honored to be part of the podcast. Thank you so much. I'm new to Fairwater, but just a little background on me. For those of you who remember, I'm what's called a former EDSer. I used to work for Ross Perot's EDS, and back in those days, they had a airline reservation system called System One, and so I worked under that regime, let's just call it, for a little bit before I made the transition to aerospace, and was in aerospace for quite a few years. Highly regulated, a lot of moving parts, everything from doing manufacture, repair, and overhaul of aircraft to tearing down aircraft, making sure that we always had traceability of all the components. So the FAA, again, highly regulated, great industry, always going through ups and downs, as kind of Jim alluded to, and Theo as well, as business ebbs and flows. The same thing happens in the aerospace industry. As cybersecurity, it's funny how that has come to fruition, because back in the day, that was really just part of normal IT, making sure that you tied down your routers and you properly segregated your networks, and you did all the things that you were supposed to do. The antivirus And and you did the training, and of course, just like anything, people with great talent always find a way to try to make money off of malicious activities, and we end up being on the short end of the stick, not from a monetary perspective, but the things that we had to put in place to make sure that we could be offensive instead of defensive. Um, so in aviation, because a lot of the systems and how they were tied to third-party suppliers, like the Boeings and the Airbuses and Lockheed Martin and other organizations of that nature. I had a lot of experience in integrating systems, and as cybersecurity, again became more prevalent because we saw the threat landscape, how it continued to evolve. Um, I ended up wearing both hats, to the point where, right now I have, I think since right before COVID, I sit on InfraGard, which is the civilian sector of the FBI for cybersecurity. I also, for one of the institutions down here, Nova University, I stood up what's called a cyber range. And in that cyber range, what we did is we started putting together curriculum for small to medium-sized businesses, also for students, so that they understood, what is an incident response plan, what is the right type of insurance and protection you have to have. What is a tabletop exercise? What are the roles people should have? And, it's amazing to see how many people just don't have a clue, and really don't even understand where to start. Um, I ended up doing some consulting, and then the job at Fairwater just was very, very blessed and fortunate that that door opened. I really wasn't looking for anything at the time, and the door just opened, and I'm just very, very blessed to be working for such an amazing organization with what I'm going to call world-class people who really care about what they do, and they love the business. So.
Well, that's excellent. Um, so this is kind of your first foray into cybersecurity on the maritime side, then, right?
Correct.
And we've seen a number of big cybersecurity incidents over the years. One that jumps out at me is the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack that took that pipeline down for several days. And I do believe, although somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that Colonial went ahead and paid the ransom to get that going again. I'm not aware of any significant, successful cyber attack against ships themselves. That doesn't mean that there haven't been, but we're really talking about the whole maritime industry, right? Because we're talking about, I mean, if you can't bring your ship into port, if you can't unload your cargo, if your cranes aren't working, if the booking software is broken. I mean, there's a lot of links in this chain that let this maritime cargo trade ecosystem work. So when you come into some place new like Fairwater, where do you start? I mean, what is the, I mean,
Well,
So,
before I let Charles answer, there is actually a case study with Maersk where one vessel did actually get hacked through the email system on board the vessel. I'm not sure how much is out there in the universe, but we definitely ramped up at my last company when that happened.
so they got into the email system. I mean,
Yeah, click link.
there's a lot
Yeah.
of people who come on board the vessels. I mean, they could just get direct access, put a thumb drive in the computer there in the office, right? I mean, that would be the most direct way to gain access.
Yeah, and Charles, I'll let you go because you and I have had this conversation enough times.
yeah, a network is a network is a network, right? It's just like anything else. There's fundamentals and best practices that you have to put in place. Um, you know, on a vessel, as we all know, it's no different than a manufacturing shop floor, right? You have OT, right, which are devices that are not typically connected to a network. And then you have IT, which are all devices and communications that are connected in the network. So when I first came in, the first thing was gaining an understanding of our systems, understanding of who our third party vendors were, how everything connected, and then quickly just delving into making sure that the fundamentals that needed to be put in place were put in place. Something as simple as I'm going to refer to this in layman's terms, right? Think of a highway and you have different exits and entries on a highway. Well, all your computers talk on one lane within the highway. All of your servers talk on a different one. The same thing as on your printers. And the first thing is again making sure that all of those were had the right type of isolation is probably the right way to say it, so that you don't have chatter or different types of communication happening on the same type of channel or network. The bigger risk is just like in any other organization is third parties. And from a third party perspective, you have a lot of suppliers, vendors, partners that have come onto a vessel, and they do a lot of maintenance and a lot of support on the vessels. And that is really, in my opinion, where the biggest risk lies. You have people who come on the vessels that don't speak English. You don't understand what they're doing. Not to call out anyone, but you have you know Russians. You have people from Europe. You have people from South America. You have people just of all these distinct areas, and you truly don't understand what they're doing. I mean, you have to trust them. So you're right that, before anything's done, you need to make sure you have a plan. You need to make sure that you understand there's control in place for any type of change that's occurring. And then, what is just like any change management process is, what do you have in place to make sure this is what's being done. How can you validate what's being done? In this case, we have vendors that come in with thumb drives and the updates, whether it's on an OT system, it could be an engine system that they're plugging in to do an update. It could be a navigation system. What are those things? What are the failback plans? And it's stepping through to make sure that you can scan, you can make sure whatever they're using, there is nothing malicious that is in that software or in that drive that could then cause another problem. Now, it may not be a problem that you'll see that day, but if there's something malicious that's on one of those drives, it could be something that's just sitting there that eventually, at a certain point in time, all of a sudden it's going to start spreading across your network because, as we all know, that's the way most of these threat actors work. It's not something that they're going to hit you with right away. They're already in your network and they're taking the time to discover, to understand how to move laterally and get the information that they need to then hit you where it really hurts.
Yeah, I read um, this book on the cybersecurity threats to the nation's power grid, and I found that it was Dan Rather wrote a book on the threat to the power grid, and the same kinds of things where you've got people who um, are providing software updates or whatnot. Big business in providing security, but we saw that CrowdStrike, one of the biggest suppliers there, I forget the name of their piece of software. You probably know, Charles, what that is, but that went down for quite a period of time when they released an update.
Mhm.
I feel a little more secure in my home environment because I run all Macintosh, all Apples on my network. So I'm basically Unix under the hood instead of Windows under the hood. So not that that can't be hacked, but it only represents what 10% of the market, 7% of the market. So it's not a really enticing target. But a lot of these systems, even ship systems, they're running around, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're running around on, you know, unpatched Windows, NT systems, and even Windows 98 systems are still out there in the wild. And I don't even think Microsoft provides security patches for those anymore. How big of a challenge is that?
It is a big challenge, and when you have systems like that, you need to make sure that they operate in an isolated environment so that you can protect it from other areas. Because you're right, Windows 98, Windows 95, Windows NT, um, Windows 10, I believe they just stopped supporting in the month of was it last month? It was in the month of October that they stopped supporting it. So when you understand that, you know, you have to isolate those systems. A lot of times, what you'll find is those systems are running third-party applications, and those applications are critical to for your vessel operationalization. So you're in a tough spot. So by isolating that computer to protect it, I mean, that's really probably the best you can do. And it's tough, but listen, it's no different than what happens in a lot of other industries, in aerospace and others, where there's just software that has been created a very, very long time ago. Some industries are very, very slow to change, and you just have to, put the best plan of action that you can to make sure that you're, protecting the house.
Well, and then you
I have a
get,
question, Dan, I have a question if I
yeah,
could.
Jim, go.
So I'm not a systems person. I never kind of got that part of my DNA working, but it seems to me that you have the technical part of the system, and then you've got the people part of the system.
Hmm.
And from what I've learned is that regardless of what you've got on your technology side, you still have people who open up a link to something that's a smoking hot deal that day and it's going to expire in 6 hours, or here's an overdue invoice. You need to pay it right away or you're going to go to collection. Something that triggers the psychology of an emotional quick response and says, I don't have time to ask. I have to do something. So it seems like it's not just corruption of the internal system that somebody comes on your boat and sticks a thumb drive in, but we're seeing ships with the fleet, one of the fleets that I work with, that regularly communicate with their home office across the other side of the world, monitoring conditions on the ship, going back and forth. And you kind of wonder, holy mackerel, doesn't even have to be on the ship anymore. It can come from some other place off. Hi, I'm your friendly guy in Singapore. Your engine temperature is too hot. Please download this. So, I mean, is that sci-fi or is that kind of stuff going on?
No, it is. I mean, and that's where the training is so important. So, you consistently have to train people so they can understand, phishing and spam and links and educate them, and as well as regularly running tests, right? And what I mean by test is, we'll run phishing campaigns once a quarter, and we'll
Right.
see who it is that clicked on the link and again, it's not to get anybody in trouble, it's to educate so they can understand as the threats continue to evolve, and the threats evolve, and the threat actors, they become more intelligent and more creative in what they're pushing out to the public, whether it's, private institutions, public institutions, or even us as individuals. You have to continue to train. So by running those phishing campaigns, running monthly cybersecurity training, it's that positive reinforcement. I mean, Jen, you're absolutely right. There's two biggest threats. One is the individual, because you can have the best protected systems in the world, and all it takes is someone to either click the wrong link or somebody to make a phone call, right? So building on your storyline, hey, I'm John and I'm calling from Singapore. We monitor your ship systems. They know the name of your company. They don't know if the stuff's outsourced, so that there's constantly 24-hour monitoring. They take that phone call, they start feeding information that isn't publicly readily available. Now that threat actor has information, and now they better understand how to come in and how to attack your system. Or maybe it's not your organization, maybe it's someone else's organization based on the information that they found out. So, and then there's the third parties also, as I stated before. I mean, those are really the three biggest threats that you have, and why you need to have a strong vendor management program and make sure that those vendors are really partners, in that they can attest to how they're training and what security parameters they have in place, and what type of training are they doing for their employee or their staff, or sometimes even their contractors as they subcontract work out.
So, Mark, how big of a problem has cybersecurity turned out to be for Fairwater and before that, Crowley? And you were also on the cruise ships, which are just a technology nightmare, I would imagine. I mean, anything with passengers, I don't like it, but
The walking, the talking, the feeding, the dying. Yes.
the dying.
I'm very blessed to have spent so many years with so many good people. I actually started sailing when we had radio officers. I started sailing when computers were just being installed on board vessels. And unfortunately, we lost our radio officers, and some of them were some of my good friends along the way. But everybody's like, oh, this is going to be great because you're going to have access to the information right in front of you at all times. But then we wouldn't have connectivity as we were crossing the Atlantic or the Pacific, or, going through the straits. And I think, as Charles has alluded to, there are bad actors. There's always going to be that threat. I'm terrified of my mom clicking on a link, and mom does listen to your podcast, so apologies, mom. But I'm worried about people actually clicking on a link, and there goes a life savings. There goes, $20,000, whatever the case may be. When it comes to the vessels, our biggest thing is really those third parties that we work very closely with. If they get hacked, how much exposure do we have? And I don't know how much Charles is able to share, but we did have a third-party vendor who did get hacked, and it's one of the largest third-party software platforms in North America. And it impacted one of our customers, two of our customers, excuse me, or vendors. And we had the opportunity to do a response to that. Charles, I'm trying not to get fired. You are the vice president of IT. Do you, in a not so subtle way, do you want to share the story, or can you allude in a way that I don't get in trouble?
Yeah, I mean, what I can basically allude to is that, this is why I'm saying, third party integration is so important. Uh, because we do, or we still do have, many third parties, but this specific instance, we had a third party that had a system that also other organizations had been getting. They had gotten, let's call it, breached, right? So back in June, Salesforce had gotten breached, and there was many large organizations that were impacted by this. Qantas is one of the organizations. I mean, publicly, they've stated that. Workday was another organization that was also impacted by this. It goes back to third party. integrations. I'll tell you that, we got on the phone with them right away as soon as we were made aware, um, and started trying to delve into the details. And there's things that with other third parties that are, what I'm going to call, subject to their interpretation. Um, and this is why the collaboration and the relationship with your third parties are so important, because the actions that need to be taken right away are paramount in order to stop the threat of something spreading very, very quickly. And it was with what happened. I'm trying to choose my words very carefully, so I apologize. We basically shut down this system once we were able to verify with our vessels that they can continue to operate without this system. So there was a plan B on how we can continue to operate the vessels. Um, at that point, what we did is we took a step back. We took 5 days to then really start dissecting everything to make sure that there, if or when we did restore the systems, that we would be protected and there wouldn't be any further threat. So there was a lot of conversation that went back and forth, and there were what I'm going to say, some lessons learned based on that specific instance in the vendor. We did have a lot of the protections in place, but there was also some recommendations that we had made to that specific vendor, and I'll give you a perfect example. When you find that you have a system like Salesforce and you've integrated with their systems, there's something that's called tokens. And I apologize if I'm getting a little too technical, right? But think of a token that says, hey, I'm Charles. Hey, I'm Dan. Hey, okay, so we authenticate Charles and Dan. This is correct. So we share a secret key that says that we can talk to each other. Well, those keys expire over a certain period of time. So when somebody has gained access to, let's just say, how you integrate into them, the first thing you should do is you revoke all of those keys, and then you force everyone to reissue and get brand new keys. Why? Because if somebody's gotten in there, they can figure out the one key and how everybody talks to each other. Now they can start spreading through their network, and they can plant little things, or they can get what's called privileged accounts, which is something that, like, somebody who has an administrative access level to a system, and then it becomes a bigger issue. So we had to go through and really walk through that whole process. And there was lessons learned. There was some education that we also went back to the vessels, and made sure that all of our mariners understood what happened, why we took the actions that we did. And we continue to operate flawlessly. And again, those type of things, it's how you react and what you do and the timeliness that you react within, that make you stronger. So it was good dry run. It was good unplanned event that happened, but it fostered some really good dialogue throughout the entire organization, and increased the awareness throughout the entire company. So,
Yeah. And Dan,
I can imagine the challenges you face, given what you do for your customers, and how you integrate all of that information. Because on a personal level, this year alone, you got this one, got the computer, and then somehow somebody got our banking routing, and we write one check a month to the housekeeper where they came up with that. So we went through all those fixes, but I mean, you just have to be diligent. They're up, that's all they do all day long is try to figure out how they can wheedle their way in.
Yep. And
The ship specifically, we got to talk about the types of systems that are connected and what systems are air gapped. Is your cargo control system air gapped so nobody can stop the flow, or worse, start a flow when the pipeline's not set up properly and you end up with an oil spill? Same thing with navigation. GPS, there is a lot of GPS spoofing going on over in the Middle East and the Red Sea right now. You could see, wait a second, my vessel is not 100 miles inland. It's literally underway and it's not even in that region right now. Also engineering. There's so much pressure right now to look at how efficient our engines are being, saving fuel and finding the right routes and that sort of thing, that real-time updates is required so that a third-party vendor can look at that. They can look at your emissions. They can look at the fuel that you're burning. They're looking at the route that you're taking. Any of those are going to impact, should they be breached, whether or not you're going from point A to point B, or you may end up at point C, which is a really big problem. So understanding which systems, if your Ectus, for example, is your Ectus directly connected to your navigational system, or is your Ectus a standalone system where maybe you have thumb drives, where your connected computers over here, you get your new charts, you get the new publications, and then you walk it across your wheelhouse and you plug it in over here saying, hey, I've got these updates. I'm going to put them in the system over here. And then you've got your backup Ectus system as well. So there's a lot of different ways to try and prevent those bad actors from getting access to the most critical systems, such as your engine, such as your navigation, and especially your cargo control systems.
So with, and I'm not a mariner by trade. I've spent enough time on boats to know it wasn't going to be a professional long-term deal. But some of us work more in the world where we do not have predefined systems which we're working with. So that's sort of the incident response world. So we and Theo has way more horror stories than I do, but you get rolled out of bed in the middle of the night. You jump in the middle seat on an airplane, you fly for a long time, you show up, everybody's throwing their computers, laptops, hooking up to printers. You're bumping into people you haven't seen for a while. You kind of have a good hug, and here we go again. And then you have a lot of new people showing up, and they don't have documents. So you're trying to share them with a thumb drive, or you're trying to access Wi-Fi's that are guests and open. So we basically, unlike a ship where you have a relatively defined system, recognizing there's a lot of challenges, which Mark was just talking about, we're in an environment many times where we go into a room that we've never been in and have to set up a computer system that not only functions internal within that room, but it's also dealing with a lot of external communications, literally, as Mark knows recently from Fairwater, over internationally on one casualty. And I know, Theo, when people come up to you and say, oh, sorry, we're from state DEQ, we can't use a thumb drive. Or I'm from the Coast Guard, we can't use MS Teams. Or hi, I'm from NOAA and we've got this new system, but you can't log into it because and you're all supposed to be integrated, but everybody comes in with their guards up. It's becoming, I think, more of a challenge.
We're ramping up for the 2026 Prince William Sound exercise, and that has a lot of state, federal, a lot of, going back to the liaison officer position, a lot of stakeholders involved who either don't have familiarity with Microsoft Teams. Some organizations don't use it at all. They rely on what we're on right now, which is a Zoom call instead, which has its own access controls. But our third-party vendor is able to create false email addresses for those folks saying, hey, listen, we know that you're not supposed to be coming to the table with this, but we're going to give you a way to come to the table using this address instead. But still use your government computer, please. So it's one of those little, okay, we're trying to make it easier for people to respond to the emergency, to Jim's point. However, at what cost? And is it realistic? Because we're doing it for an exercise. Is it realistic that we're going to have 25 email addresses ready to go for instance, the United States Coast Guard, which we're going to find out in April, another exercise, to be able to log in and see our software? Or do we just say, hey, we'll operate in our software, you just tell us what you need from it, and you don't go in there at all?
It's kind of the approach taken in Baltimore when the EPA and the Coast Guard and Maryland Department of MDE wanted all these plans, and there was no shared system, and as Dan pointed out, no mechanism to get them on the team site. So I sat with my computer and let them review documents and edit documents at will, and that's how we resolved it at that point. That was a kind of a different scenario as opposed to a long-term oil spill situation. But the EPA sat down and looked at the sampling plan and the air monitoring plan and the community air monitoring plan, and they sat down and looked at the waste plan, and it went through that, as well as Maryland Department of Ecology, and that's how we produced a joint consensus on that plan development process.
It's almost like we need to go back to paper again.
Oh, please no.
Yellow
I know,
stickies.
Yellow
T-cards,
stickies.
let's go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
T-cards. I'm in. Well, but Theo, you're raising an interesting point, because the system that we've developed over the years has always been sort of oil spill focused, and it's been about the booming, the temporary storage, environmental protection. It's like a cadence of practice. Now we're seeing most of the casualties are more cargo related, cargo box fires, cargo fires at different. So we have a lot of new players showing up, municipal fire departments, municipal public health. I mean, a lot of the non-traditional agencies seem to be becoming now more engaged. So it seems you're seeing an exponential growth, if you will, in how cumbersome some of the technology is when you have to use it real time with people who are strangers. And how we get over that, I don't know. But I see it as being a bigger problem, because everybody wants in on the information, which increases the risk, right? And it's particularly the more real time. It seems the more real time your information, the more connected you are to the system. It's that real-time information everybody wants that exposes the systems to risk of them forwarding a link or opening something and having it corrupt. I don't know, but it's something that I get concerned about.
The two coasts are prime examples right now. We got a ship with a coal fire situation on the East Coast, and a ship in the West Coast with a bunch of containers that were involved in a fire situation. I'm not sure why the Gulf Coast got left out of that melee, but we'll wait and see.
What happens in the Gulf stays in the Gulf.
Stays in the Gulf. Do not talk about the Gulf. Don't do that.
Like, just another tanker. What the heck?
Yeah.
No, I think what you guys were talking about earlier, I did recently go through a large response, but it was in the United Kingdom. It was in the North Sea. And one of the things that happened is we had people that had never worked with on response before, and we have a third-party software, and we were asking for people to use this third-party software to create the 201, to create the 207s, to create all the ICS forms, to the point that even my own internal group reached out to me and said, Mark, we only use this once a year for a drill. How are we supposed to remember how to use this thing? And this is during the ship is on fire. The crew have abandoned the ship. And I said, well, why don't we just do the training? And so on morning 2 of the response, I had nearly 30 people in a training session on how to use the software. And I think that's one of the responses is, okay, can they peel away from the actual response? Or are they, it's a logistics section chief. Well, she's going to be in the actual unified command. She's going to be in, a planning meeting, whatever the case may be. But everybody that reports through, the ones that are touching the technology, I need you all over here in the training channel. And we're going to train you up on this software because you haven't, either you've never touched it or you haven't touched it in more than a year. And that was kind of a game changer, being able to bring new people and train people during the actual event as it was ongoing. And I think that's one thing that we have to remember to do over and over and over again is find out where the weaknesses are and whether they're cyber weaknesses, whether they are just knowledge of how a system works. Have that capability to teach while responding. Have that as a focus on the side for people that want to help, because they really do want to help, but they just don't have the knowledge. Have that capability to put that into the universe.
No, I think, Mark, what you're talking about is, making that part of your response plan is having a few folks that are subject matter experts that can help kind of shepherd that process through. But on the flip side of that, there are ways to there are ways that if you're having people who are entering data and then there's actual documents that those need to view that information for the response to understand how to continue along the process to make sure everything's being responded properly. So there are platforms, something as simple as a Microsoft SharePoint site where you can have guest users with access, where you can restrict the access, where they can only view the document, not download the document, not edit the document, not print the document. So, I mean, I think those are, as you build the response plans, those would be, hey, these are our checklist of items. This is what we need to do. And that would be one of the things that, from my experience, I know we can turn that up very, very quickly to facilitate the response and kind of get rid of some of those roadblocks. And I do understand what you mean, interagency. When you talk about aerospace, it's the same thing. We're talking about the FAA and the EPA, and so it's similar challenges.
Well, if I could toss in a little jaded cynicism on that point, is that I think there's way too many plans that the agencies want to review in the first place. Most of them don't know what they're looking at. You've got experts who are preparing them. They're people like Theo or Dan's running a planning section. I mean, these are people that have done it for decades. And Theo, I think you're like me. We can say we've done it since the last century. We're starting to create all this stuff just for purposes because we know how to create it. And I think we're losing sight of the fact of what's relevant, what's necessary. That's what we need to do at this phase. Theo, 60 plans is not an uncommon expectation, but I mean, what's for lunch? What's the menu for lunch? Let's check that plan. And it just seems to me that responsible parties, such as the Fairweathers and stuff, I think really need to work on as we look at, and I agree with you, Mark, train the trainer, train people, I get it. But the more we open up that focal point, the more chefs you have in the kitchen and the more bogged down your system becomes, as well as the risk goes up. So I tend to think, I mean, if you're going to have somebody from DEQ look at a salvage plan or a dive plan who doesn't even have a scuba license, I don't understand what the point of that delay is. So it's just something that's maybe kind of the real world part. Just because we can do it doesn't mean we should, I guess is the thought.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm gonna rip a Band-Aid off. Why is a vessel sailing around with a 1,200-page response plan when they need the front page, which is the contacts, and the other 1,199 pages are for shoreside responders with all the tactics? And I always laugh when I look at a massive emergency response plan because it's required by law. As things happen, as Open 90 came out, as the state of Alaska, state of Washington, state of California rules and regulations add up. All of these response plans. At one point, I counted 15 binders in a captain's cabin. There were 15 unique emergency response plans for oil spills,
Yeah.
and they must carry them on board. And luckily, we've gotten a lot of the states and the agencies to say, oh, you can keep them electronically. But I want that front page. I want the thing that just has, hey, here's the phone numbers. Here's your first phone number. You're going to call your QI. Here's your second one. The QI doesn't answer. Here's your OSRO. Here's your TNT salvage. Your salvage and marine firefighter. Here's the people that you absolutely need to call. And after that, clean up the spill.
I start off all of my ICS classes where people are in the room asking who's read the response plan. And inevitably, if you got 40 people in the room, I get two hands. People don't read them. And you're right, Mark. You need the part that's necessary for the response. You talked about how, 90% is for the people in the field. I would say that 40% is just addressed to the regulators to show how this plan complies. The whole first 2, 3 chapters, you could just tear that out of the part that goes to the vessel and throw it away because it's irrelevant to them completely. I'm going to circle back a little bit to cybersecurity and say one of the things that I've started to do, we at the Washington State Maritime Cooperative, if we're setting up a command post, we bring MSRC in with their satellite internet system to run the internet. We don't use the hotel's internet at all. So we bring an internet provider and they provide our backbone. They set up all the Wi-Fi in the command post. They've got antivirus software running on their system. So we try to have a little more control over the connection that goes to the internet. And they've locked a lot of the various ports down ahead of time for us. So for instance, if I want to run, we use some font software that is built in FileMaker that's running on a server in Amazon Web Services. Well, to access that over the internet, over a browser, there are a couple of ports I need open that aren't normally open. So I go to MSRC and we make an arrangement to have those ports open in advance. But controlling the internet itself, I think, is an important step. Your thoughts, Charles?
I agree wholeheartedly. Look, there's what you're referring to is something that's called an access control list, where you specifically state what traffic you allow, what ports you're connected to, what sites you're allowed to connect to, because what that does is it mitigates the risk. Somebody going to a rogue website, clicking on a link, going someplace where they shouldn't go. On the converse side of that is if you have a secure system, you're also actually stating, hey, you can only connect to this system from this place, and if you're not coming from this specific address through this port, you cannot connect. So that is actually a great practice in how to harden a connection and how to properly harden the way that you can interact with your system. So it's the old the old moat and the old fort, so to speak. You have the moat there so nobody can get through, and that's really the best way to protect.
I'm all about moats. I don't know if anybody of your sci-fi fans watch the Battlestar Galactica, but one of the premises there, see Charles, he's like, is that all those computer systems aboard the Battlestars are air gapped, right? There are no networks. And why? Because in the original Cylon human war, that's how they got in there, right? That's how they won. And so all those systems remain air gapped. And then I remember one episode where it's like, well, we need to network these together so that, we can do this other thing. It's like, whoa, time out. Right. You've forgotten the primary lesson here. This is why we don't do it. And it becomes us, the crew members, people like myself who have just enough skills to break things. Right. There's Mark. He's like, yeah, don't let Smiley anywhere near these things. So I was doing a thing the other day. This was actually pretty cool. We could bring AI into this. There's a website I wanted to pull data from, and it turned out that there were like 13,000 records I was looking to get, and they crossed over about 140 different if you were doing it by hand and cutting and pasting, you'd have to keep clicking next, 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 and doing it over and over and over again. But I had Anthropic's Claude write me a Python script that I was then able to run in my terminal, and it scraped that whole thing in like a minute and a half, and then said, "Hi, I'm done. Here's your Excel spreadsheet with all, almost 14,000 records on it." I didn't write one line of that code. I knew just enough to ask for what I needed, download the .py script onto a location on my laptop, and then pointed my terminal at it and said, "Go to work." I bet I could become a good hacker doing that too. And I don't need to
And
know anything.
no, yeah. So just so you know, Claude has open source development tools, and in the month of August and the month of September, they were hacked, and the hackers used their development tools to get into the code, and they understand the prompts. So as it's working through a prompt, they injected their hack in between there. So you thought it was still, so it tricked Anthropic, right, Claude, to think it was still part of the prompt, and that's how they got in. So it happened in August. It happened in September. There was, I think, 3 weeks ago now. You have other people who use, whether it's Gemini, and there's a few others, where when you're typing in and in the browser, now what they're doing is they're putting hash signs, the pound sign in there. And by putting the pound sign in your actual URL browser, it's allowing also the hacker to gain access into your session within the internet. So, as quick as the technology and the tools are coming out, the quicker they are coming up with how to go ahead and figure out how to use it for their own malicious gain. So, and that's why the tools and education and how you use AI is extremely important. I mean, I'm a big proponent of taking your own data and building your own learning library with the information, and then you can run your own algorithms internally. But again, with anything AI, if you don't firewall it and make sure that you don't allow it to learn, right? And there's a small little checkbox, and whether it's ChatGPT or all these other platforms that you should read through and select anything you're doing, it's learning, and I mean, it is available to the public. Anybody else can leverage that. So, and it's dangerous. Our vessels. I mean, I'm saying our vessels, but that's the next thing, is that we don't use AI on our vessels. So let me be very clear in saying that. But that's the next thing, right? Because as technology comes out, everybody wants to use it because they could become more efficient. So that's the next threat, in my opinion, as the vessels become more interconnected. It's just another thing that you have to have an offensive posture to make sure you're protecting yourself from.
And Dan, you said something that made me laugh, because you said, I could be the hacker. We have some of the greatest crew members at sea, some of the best mariners in the world. There's always somebody that thinks they're smarter than we are. There's always going to be that person on board, whether it is Royal Caribbean or whether it's Crowley or whether it's Fairwater or Maersk, where they've got just enough knowledge to be dangerous. Or they bring something from home. They order something online. They get it from one of the very popular shipping companies. Not going to name that company, but it gets delivered to the vessel, but its country of origin is suspicious, and it's just plugged in on board. It doesn't even have to be plugged into their computer. It doesn't even need to be plugged into the network. It could be like a Wi-Fi extender.
Yep.
Guess what? It's touching your system, just like that. It could be collecting your data, just like that. This is the reality that the 21st century mariner is actually living with. Is somebody is always smarter. Somebody's, oh, I can boost the signal so I can use it in my room and I can watch the game tonight from my room. if I just plug this into a 110 outlet in the wall, and sure enough, that's how that actually works. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
It's always the people component, right? I mean, really, it's the people. Um, and that's what kind of gets me concerned sometimes when we show up and Mark, there's a cast of 400 some strangers all show up into a big room and everybody's plugging into things and connecting on Wi-Fi's. And while you're trying to silo what's going on to an incident specific, shall we say, data source, every company that's coming to bear is essentially exposing their company to this sort of shopping mall of the incident command post. And everybody who comes from every agency that connects is all of a sudden exposing their agencies to anything that could permeate out. Is my understanding. It can kind of sort of morph or metastasize, so to speak.
Yeah,
And
you go
that's
in
what causes
trust.
some of the challenges.
Yeah, you got to trust. And Dan talked about how we at Wismic set up an MSRC network. Well, Fairwater, I've got a Starlink in my office. I've got not just the Starlink that we could like send out into the field to set up our own virtual incident command post or incident command post, but you have to trust me that I've been maintaining that device and that it's been connected and that it's gotten its updates and everything else that comes with it. You come in as my OSRO, you come in as my salvage and marine firefighter, you come in as just somebody that knows what they're doing and they're going to try and help. This is our network. You have to trust me with your computer, with your company's information. Because what's the first thing that we put together is we put together the ICS 207. What's your phone number? What's your email address? How do I get a hold of you? Right off the bat, right out the gate, we are collecting sensitive information from people as part of our response plan.
Well, I'm not sure how much I trust Starlink either. I mean, I use it and I like it. I've got a Starlink on my boat. I've got a Starlink that used to be on my house that's now stored in a case and in my emergency gear locker here at the house. And actually, you talk about the updates. I had to break it out like the day before it was going to become a brick if I didn't run all the updates. So I had to drag it out, set the satellite dish out in the yard, and let it connect up and churn along for, I think it ran like a half a dozen updates because I hadn't had it out for a while. But, when Elon Musk turned Starlink off selectively in the Ukraine in the early part of the war, I mean, I just don't trust, I have no alternative but to use it in some circumstances, but I don't trust it. And I try to run a VPN whenever I'm using the Starlink. And I use ExpressVPN, but I don't know how protected I am doing that. It gives me a certain inner sense of security, whether that's valid or not.
I think that's
Um,
a good question for Charles. VPNs, are they worth, what a company pays for to get it across their networks? Is the VPN the solution, or is it just another tool?
I think it's another tool in combination with the right antivirus and the correct endpoint protection. So I think it's a suite. I mean, what the VPN does is it creates that secure tunnel so you're able to communicate, not letting anybody the ability to hijack your session or your connectivity. But it's really not just the VPN. It's all of your security suite of tools working together that you need to have. Because if you're running a VPN and you don't have any other stuff there, you're still exposed. You still have a threat.
Yeah, and then I find reasons to turn my VPN off. And a great example is so I've got my Mac Mini as my desktop computer in my office, and then I set up my laptop, and in order to take advantage of the Mac's ability to share a keyboard and mouse across these computers, I have to turn the VPN off. Otherwise, the computers don't see each other, and I can't drag the mouse from one screen to another. And so I find it more convenient to be able to do that than to have that level of security of having the VPN running. So I'm my own problem, and I know it.
Well, I mean, look, there's even there's some banking sites that if you're on a VPN, believe it or not, they don't allow you to connect and conduct your banking business. There's issues all the way around. I mean, are you running a firewall? You could have a firewall without running the VPN. At least the firewall will protect you from making sure that you're closing down unnecessary ports for your, even for your Starlink connection. I mean, Starlink is just creating the internet connection. You still have to have a firewall. You still have to have a VPN. You still have to tell it what you'll allow, what you want to allow, and even that consistently is changing. So you always have to update that. It's no different than, you know, taking your car in for maintenance at different intervals, right? There's certain things that you need to do to make sure it continues to run. I mean, cybersecurity is no different.
What do you think of
Well,
Starlink, Charles?
well,
I mean, do you find, I mean, I'm sure you're using it on your vessels, right? Because at the moment there aren't a lot of other good cost-effective choices. I mean, you could use iridium or whatever, but those are massively expensive and not as good, frankly.
I mean, look, Starlink does the job. We do have the appropriate security around Starlink to make sure that we're protecting it. We, at the firewall level, we do throttle the connections, so we ensure that the bandwidth that we use is appropriate for operations versus other, as I would call it, appropriate use on the vessel. So. You will see next year other competitors coming into the market. Amazon is one of them that's coming in um, to try to take market share from Starlink. So there are other players that you'll see that are coming into the market as well to lower the costs and make it more competitive. So, look, Starlink has been out there the longest right now. I think it's mature. Again, nothing is 100% foolproof. Nothing is 100% safe as long as you implement it safely and you continue to monitor it. So, I mean, if not, there's really no other way. I mean, you go back to, Inmarsat or something like that, where, you just turn it on and you get your emails when you get your emails, and you might as well go back to pen and paper and Morse code to try to get things across. It's just different. I mean, the world has evolved, so you have to evolve with it. I mean, fortunately or unfortunately.
it's interesting you raise the point about cost and making things more accessible because, people talk about Starlinks and a lot of the remote operations up here, it's Starlink minis that's the size of a
Mhm.
tablet. And so what that's done is it's now leveraged connectivity into more remote locations. And part of that is good because we recently used it for the Halong typhoon response. We had a couple communities we were assigned to by under a BOA Coast Guard contract to deal with just chaos of oily debris, scraps scattered, no infrastructure. So they used a mini, and when they were in the field, and when they'd go back to the operations base, which was a school, they'd download their images. So they would be taking images with Survey 123 of every debris pile they found and document. There was a total of 260 in one community. All that data is coming up. People are going, "Oh, your internet's working. Can I log on to it? I got to let my wife know that the freezer's on order or something." And in this remote, but it's almost like, again, the technology, while it's becoming more affordable, it also becomes more risky because it's becoming available to more and more people who aren't part of that. Maybe market's not the right term, but your security net. You have a security net with the people that you hire. You have different levels of training. It just seems that as we expand the accessibility, more and more people are coming in. And in a response environment, it's all about collaborating and sharing and working together. And it almost seems like that's the biggest risk to the system that you're trying to put together is making it available, but also securing it.
And not only that, you're at the whim, it's a private company. You're at the whim of a human being, a very unique human being who can, as Dan put it, turn it off. Say they don't like the response to an oil spill up in remote Alaska, and they just decide one day, no, I don't think that should be that. And suddenly, because it's a private company, it turns off. It's not run by a government agency. It's not run by, a consortium. A single person can impact your response capabilities. That's to me the nightmare scenario.
That is very disturbing to me. That you're absolutely right. That's the thing. As we look at our government agencies like the Coast Guard, like the Navy, become more and more dependent on it. Starlink has become a national security asset, and yet they don't control it. It is quite disturbing. I am looking forward to Amazon, to AWS coming into the market. Although I'm not sure I trust Jeff Bezos anymore.
Right.
Um,
At least
uh,
he's a boat guy.
well, he has a
That's
boat.
true.
Well,
I
he's
mean,
got a couple of, he's got a
he's got a
couple.
boat. Well, and
A
and he's got a
little bit
rocket
bigger
a
than
rocket
Theo's
ship
boat, but
too.
he's a boat guy.
But
Yeah, the
these
rocket ship.
but the technology is hard to beat. Like I was looking, my wife drives 2 hours every she does a night shift supervisor at a hospital uh, in Oregon, and she will drive in on a Friday afternoon and come home on a Tuesday morning. And in that drive, she drives through the Yakima Indian Reservation where there's about a 45-minute dead spot for cellular. It's completely dead. And if something were to happen during that drive, she'd have no comms. And I'm a ham radio guy, so I looked at put something like that in. But what did I decided on? I bought a Starlink Mini and I put it in her car. And they've got a new subscription service where the thing can be on standby for $5 a month. And on standby, it's using low bandwidth, but you can send a text message. And the mini disc has a battery attached to it. So it'll run for about 3 hours on its own charge without having to plug it into anything else. Plus, it runs 12 volt natively. And at $325 for the hardware, it was a no-brainer that's the backup. I could have got her a Garmin InReach for sending text messages or that kind of thing. But so the technology is amazing, except there's that one little problem, Mark. There's that one little
Well,
problem.
trust.
Yeah.
Trust, yes.
It's funny you say that because T-Mobile, I want to say, I think it was about 6 months ago, they were in talks with, actually with Starlink, where they were going to start also leveraging the Starlink network so you could use your mobile phone exactly for that point, Dan. In those dead zones, you'd be able to use Starlink or T-Mobile connecting through Starlink in order to get that connectivity, but that never materialized. I don't know. I don't recall exactly why or if that's dead in the water, but I mean, who's to say that we don't see, as telecommunications continues to evolve, cellular networks and satellite networks kind of converging and working a little bit more closely together?
I think that will happen. Cellular is just radio.
Hmm?
But I just put up a new UHF VHF antenna on the house yesterday, connected it up to
That's
my
cool.
new IC 7100 and was out on the net, and I'm gonna put up a 23-foot marine single sideband antenna on the house as soon as my new mount arrives with a tuner. All this other technology for communications and setting up internet networks is great, but it's not everything. I think there's a place in emergency communications for good old-fashioned radio.
Now, I got to break out my old tinfoil hat when you all talk about it, stuff like that.
Well, based on the fact that Wismic is so squared away, Theo, I think that's the next place we should go for a major marine casualty. You could drive to it. You got good comms. It'll be great. Dan will be a good host.
It'll be great. It'll be great. MSRC has digital repeaters throughout the area, and
Setting aside DEQ, of course,
oh
everything else
yeah.
will be fine.
Well, we'll talk about DEQ some other day. But we have a letter of agreement with MSRC, WSMC does, to allow us to operate on those repeaters, and all of our incident commanders have been issued radios that are programmed for those repeaters. It's not perfect. We have a base station in our command center in Seattle so that our watchstander can monitor those frequencies. And the goal is that, if there's a big weather incident, if there's a big icing glaze incident a few years ago that brought down power lines and took down cell phone towers, to be able to have backup communications, I think is important. And I really think we should be looking hard at using high frequency single sideband like we used to do. When I was sailing, when I was chief mate, I'd be talking to the office from the middle of Bering Sea in Seattle. Once a morning on 4125, we would be out there on the net, and that is reliable communications right there, and I love it. Well, guys, this looks like we're coming to the end of this particular episode. Charles, any advice for people that are concerned about cybersecurity? What would be the first steps that you would take?
Backups are always essential. Don't count on one backup. Always, what I'm going to say or called is have your backup stored in an alternate location. So if something always were to happen, you could still retrieve your data. Um, Patch management is extremely important. You should be doing that on a 30-day cycle at a minimum. Whether it's your operating system, whether it's your software, make sure that your antivirus is also consistently up to date. You need to make sure that your network is set up properly, whether it's intrusion prevention and detection, that it's always monitoring. You mentioned CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is an expensive product, but I will tell you, in my opinion, it's the best that's out there. Whether you're using just their endpoint protection or whether you're using their Falcon Complete, which is just which is an overall SIM solution where they're constantly monitoring and they will proactively, if they see a threat, take care of that for you. Training. Look, training is very, very important. Training, making sure you consistently run phishing exercises, and it's just fundamentals. It's always be offensive on the offensive. Don't be on the defensive. And just it's the training and awareness, I would say, is the most important thing. And making sure that you evaluate and continue to have those relationships with your partners or vendors. And it's okay to ask the question. It's okay to say no. You don't have to be bleeding edge. I'd rather go slow and cautious to make sure that we're protected than being the first one at the finish line and then finding out that we've created more problems for ourselves by doing that. It really is okay to say no. It's cut twice and measure once. No, sorry, I said that the wrong way. Measure twice and cut once. Sorry about that.
Cut 3 times and it's still too damn short.
Yeah, I mean, we live in it's going to be, strange to hear this from a technology guy. As much good as technology has done for us, I think it's also been a detriment to us and our society. People have forgotten how to communicate with each other, look at each other eye to eye, and really have those communication skills, which are extremely important to have that trust and that integrity. Everybody hides behind the screen, hides behind the chats, and it just that doesn't work. Like I said, you don't have to have the best of the best. You need to make sure that you properly evaluate everything to make sure what you're rolling out is correct for your environment and your organization. And you need to understand the risk tolerance and that everybody understands that, because it's a joint decision that everybody needs to make together. Education is extremely important.
Well, before we go, I want to toss out some save the dates for people who are listening. And the first is for March 24th and 25th of next year, which is going to be the National Harbor Safety Conference being held in Seattle. This is going to be a great event. And not solely because I'll be hosting or moderating the panel on shipboard firefighting. So we'll be looking at a bunch of the local initiatives that have taken place in the Pacific Northwest, as well as what's going on nationally for how we address these ship fires. And it's going to be a great panel, not the least of which is because I'll be an incredible moderator. So come and do that. And then I want to point out the next Washington State Maritime Cooperative Planning Conference, which will be October 21st and 22nd of 2026 in Tacoma, Washington, where we might have Charles and revisit cybersecurity as a panel, as a presentation for that conference. Hopefully, Charles, you could be convinced to make a trip out here to Washington State and visit some of your vessels out here too. It's a good opportunity to come and see the boats. Anybody else have something they want to pass to the audience before we go? Going once, going twice. Well, then, thank you everybody for taking a moment to join us on a Sunday morning. We'll be back again next Sunday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time with our great panel. So everybody go enjoy what there is left of the weekend and get back to work on Monday. If you're getting value from the tactics meeting, whether it's maritime safety, environmental insight, or just good conversation, consider supporting the show. We're a lean crew with a big mission, and your support helps keep the command post running smoothly.